So the government and the bank both say we have to move into a full-size house instead of our little tiny house. It's kind of disappointing considering how big of an advantage there is to living in a tiny house. Now, there are of course pros and cons to everything, but I think the pros far outweigh the cons in living on a tiny house. But I do want to try to convey some of the good aspects of living in a tiny house. It's my opinion that in the future, most people are going to have to live in tiny houses. Just not going to be able to afford to live in a full-size house. We hear that the newest generations are kind of focusing in on buying tiny houses. Now, we only spent $5,000 on ours. I built it. I know the people out there, oh, that's just nothing but a shed. Well, it might be, but it's my shed. I really like it. You can buy them. When I was looking, they went up for $90,000. So I don't know why I would want to buy a tiny house for $90,000. You could go to Home Depot and pick up one of those sheds for about the same price as this. It's not built quite as well as this one. This one I use 2x6s. It's well insulated. But if you didn't know how to build anything, you didn't want to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a tiny house, you could pick up one of those sheds pretty cheaply. As a matter of fact, trailer park, I don't know, several miles down the road from us, has a Home Depot shed on it. I find it neat. You know, they're paying rent for the mobile home pad, but then they got that house on it, or shed, or whatever you want to call it. And they decorate it kind of nicely. I mean, some of them are pretty nice looking. I built this all by myself. Carolyn helped me lift this north wall here. But other than that, I did everything. Well, except for the shower. We bought one of those plastic showers, and we had to, she had to help me assemble that. You can't do that by yourself, even though the instructor says you can. I put it in the wood stove by myself. The advantages to living in a tiny house is it forces you to minimize your life. And I think this is key. I think people have way too much stress in their life because of the stuff they have. There isn't anything in this house that is all that expensive. Maybe the wood stove is probably the most expensive thing we got, and we bought it used. It's got a fully functional freezer. We get 30 days worth of meat in that. Well, of course, we pack them up, you know, all that ground meat and everything. Pack them up real tight in the Ziploc bags, and then kind of slide them in there like books. And so, of course, you don't have room for a TV, so that means we have to watch Netflix or Amazon Prime or something like that. Right now, we're watching X-Files. That was one of the things that I really dreaded. Of course, we started out as a nomadic lifestyle before we came here, but I was really not looking forward to losing my TV. But it really wasn't that big of an adjustment once you get into Netflix and Prime. You know, Prime we pay for anyways because we got Amazon and you get deliveries. And Netflix, Carolyn likes watching Netflix. She stays up later than I do, so when I go to bed, she'll pick up a TV show on Netflix that she likes. So we keep them both. I mean, the subscription fee is a lot less than cable fee. Now think about that. Last time I had cable was internet and cable, and I know it was like $150 a month. So we have two cell phones, the Netflix. So I think our cost is, for the two cell phones, is 80 bucks, something like that with Netflix. Prime I don't count because I'd have Prime whether it had TV on it or not. The other thing is the electricity. It just doesn't take much to power this place. We have an on-demand water heater, takes propane, but that we use a camping propane water heater, and it doesn't use more than maybe 20 pounds every 2 or 3 months. Doesn't hardly use anything. Whereas you have one of those big water heaters, you're constantly having to heat that water, even if you're not using it. You'll be at work for 8-10 hours. It may kick on 2 or 3 times a day, and you haven't used any water. Mine only heats when you're using hot water. And the little heater costs maybe 150 bucks. Like I said, it's a little camping heater. And then we have a Windows pad that I do video editing on. We got the two cell phones. Lights, we use a rechargeable lantern. And the charge on that lasts maybe 2-3 nights. You know, now that daylight savings are, you know, fall forward and all that stuff, we're having to use it for a little bit longer. But really the tablet, the Windows tablet I was telling you about, it can really light the place up also. Now this is just a little bit bigger than maybe a bedroom. So we got our bed in there, we've got a refrigerator, my desk, all the firewood for probably 3 weeks worth of firewood in there. And then we got our canned goods shower and toilet and that kind of thing. So for example, when we got the cat, it forced us to think about, do we really have room for a cat? Now she just showed up and it was cute. She accidentally got trapped in a rabbit trap and I let her go. Well, a few days later, I had this tub of lard, literally a tub. It was a small tub of lard. And she was biting at the lid, trying to get it open. She was starving to death. Of course, I'm trying to take it away from her because I don't want her to get into it. And we had a can of cat food. I was feeding the cat maybe a year or two ago. We had one left, so I opened it up and she ate it. And she's hung around ever since. So eventually, well, there she is right there. Maybe you can see her at the wood pile. I'm looking at you. What are you looking at? It got cold one night and I brought her in the house. And of course, now you got to have room for a litter pan, kitty litter. And so Carolyn had to rearrange the whole house. So it forces you to decide, do you really need things? And that cuts down cost and stress. What do we got to eliminate? What do we got to rearrange? Our big thing is we store our canned goods and our chickens and meats. So we have to find room to store that. So that takes up a big portion of our storage. Now, a lot of people say, well, you should get a storage shed. Well, that defeats the purpose. If you're getting a storage shed, that means you got more junk. And I think people really need to get away from junk. Look, here's the thing. I think it was in the Depression era, before the Depression era. Don't quote me on the numbers. You could probably go look this up. But I read one time, again, don't quote me, that let's say each family member had 100 square feet of house back in the 20s or 30s. So if you had a 400 square feet house, that means you had 4 people living in it. Well, today it's substantially moved up. So let's say you have 4 people, you may need an 800 square foot house now. The reason is banks. Banks got into this home thing and made it the American dream because they want you to buy a home on credit and you pay for it for the rest of your life. I mean, think about that. 30-year mortgage. They're making money from you every month for nearly the rest of your life. You finally settle down, buy a house in your 30s. You know, by 60s, you're retiring. You've paid all that time in. So they want you buying a house your entire working life. So this was the strategy. And all these bankers got together way back when and decided that's what they're going to do. So instead of you building a little cabin, they decided they wanted to get you to build a house. And they wanted you to build a bigger house and a bigger house and a bigger house. And in 2008, we had that mortgage financial crash. And that's all it was, is banks trying to trick people into buying houses they couldn't afford. And when interest rates went up, people lost everything. But the banks didn't lose anything. Oh, I mean, some banks closed, but the rich got richer on that deal. So they don't want you building houses like this. So what do? How do they get you to build something bigger than this? They go to the local governments and they say, look, you know, you got to have a minimum square footage on your house, and everybody's going to have a house. You know, your neighbors are going to want to have value of property value. They can't have this next to their house. And so they'll pay off government people to make laws that says, okay, you got to have a minimum of a 400 square foot house, or you can't buy a shed. In Tennessee, I always thought you could go to Tennessee and buy one of those Home Depot sheds and put it on your property. As a matter of fact, there's a YouTuber who did that. So I thought it was legal. But I looked it up a while back, and in Tennessee, state law says you cannot live in a shed because of safety concerns. Isn't the safety concern my concern? Why does the state have to tell me what to do? Well, because they don't want you giving your money to Home Depot, your 5,000 bucks. They want you to give it to the banks, and the banks pay off the politicians. Now, of course, some person, I'm sure, is going to say, well, if you have a family, you can't live in something like that. Well, of course not. You can't live in something like this if you have a family. You could double the size. We have this 10-foot porch in the back. We had talked about if we ever needed to, we could expand it out for the back porch. So I kind of built it. It's on a trailer frame, this is. Of course, that's what made it so easy to build, was the trailer frame. So you put it on a trailer frame, and then you could just extend it out. Here's the thing, they say you can't buy a Home Depot shed. But then they allow you to go and buy a mobile home. This was a mobile home when we came here. I showed you footage of that the other day. And it's made out of 2x2s. I mean, they're just really flimsy 2x2s. Whereas the shed is at least a 2x4. And it is built to code. When you look at the studs and everything, it's all built correctly. It's not about safety, it's about money. It's all about money. And they want you to make it spending your money. Well, when the economy is like it is now, people can't afford to spend money. So I've been telling people for a while now, and I actually got an email from somebody who said they're doing exactly this, is buy yourself a piece of property. You can find a piece of property pretty cheap somewhere. This one was $4,200. Had a well on it. Now, is it huge? No, it's an acre and a half. It's got a power line running through it. Of course, you know, a million people say, oh, that means you're hooked up to the grid. It doesn't mean it's hooked up to the grid. It means the property was cheap. Because now I have to keep an easement. People seem to have their own definitions of off-grid. My definition of off-grid is I don't want to be tied to electric and water and being told what to do. It's not necessarily I want to be a million miles away from somebody. But you can see the meter base. There's no meter in it. No lines coming off of it. So there's no electric here. But it reduced the price of the property. So if you're really struggling to make your payments, this is how you go about doing it. You find you something that isn't ideal. It's not exactly what you want. It's not the 20 acres. No, but it's something. And we don't live in an incorporated area. We don't have any regulations. Didn't have to build this house to code or any of that stuff. And within a year, we were set. We were done. Like I was saying, get yourself a piece of property. Well, how can I afford a piece of property? Well, you sell your house. Get whatever equity you can get out of it. If you can get $50,000, buy yourself a used camper, park it on your new piece of property, and start building this. So you go out and get a camper. Let's say it's $1,000. You got your camper for $1,000, $5,000 for the house, $5,000 for the property. You got $10,000 invested. You get some solar panels. There's another $1,000, maybe $2,000. So for, I don't know, let's just call it $20,000. You have everything you need. You still have $30,000 left over in equity from your home, and nobody can bother you now. That's the key to this: is living as disconnected as possible, even though the banks and the government doesn't want you to. So if you'll click this up next box, take you to a video where I was talking about wood stoves. So if I can inspire you to get your piece of the dream. Thanks for watching.